Everyone was laughing, clinking glasses, and taking pictures under the golden fairy lights, everyone except Lila Carter, who sat alone at the corner table, a seat the wedding planner had awkwardly added at the very end of the layout. Her dress was modest, her makeup carefully done, but the loneliness in her eyes was impossible to hide. Guests whispered. Old friends avoided eye contact. She had been invited because she once belonged, but after her divorce, she didn't quite fit in anywhere anymore. Just as she reached for her glass of water to escape the awkward silence, a tall man in a perfectly tailored black suit stopped in front of her. He smiled, the kind of smile that instantly silenced the room. "Excuse me," he said softly, eyes glimmering with warmth. "Would you mind pretending to be with me for a bit?" The entire room froze. And that was the moment everything in Lila's life began to change. Lila Carter had not planned on crying that night. She'd told herself she would go to her cousin's wedding, smile politely, and quietly slip out after dessert. It had taken her 3 hours to find a dress that didn't make her feel invisible. She'd spent the morning getting her little boy, Noah, ready to stay with her neighbor for the night. It was the first time she'd gone out in months, but the moment she arrived, she regretted it. The laughter, the champagne, the whispers all reminded her of the life she used to have before her husband left her for someone else. When she found her name card at the far end of the room, table 14, she realized it wasn't a seat of honor. It was the table for leftovers, the distant relatives, awkward plus ones, and in her case, the divorced single mom no one knew how to include. She smiled politely through conversations she wasn't part of, laughed at jokes she didn't understand, and prayed no one would notice how alone she felt. But people did notice. Her ex-husband's new wife, sitting just a few tables away, whispered something to her friends, and they giggled behind their champagne glasses. Lila's chest tightened. She wanted to disappear. That's when she saw him, the man in the black suit, standing by the bar, watching quietly. He wasn't mingling. He wasn't showing off. He looked tired, like someone who had no reason to pretend either. When their eyes met, he gave a small, understanding nod. But before she could look away, one of the bridesmaids, her ex-husband's sister, approached her table. "Oh, Lila. Didn't realize you were coming alone. How brave of you." The words were sweet, but the tone wasn't. A few heads turned. Lila managed a tight smile. "Just here to celebrate the happy couple." The bridesmaid leaned closer. "You know, they almost didn't have a seat for you. But I told them you'd probably be fine sitting anywhere." Something inside Lila cracked. She stared down at her plate, blinking fast. And that's when a shadow fell across the table. A deep voice broke the tension. "Actually, she's sitting with me." The bridesmaid turned, startled. It was him, the man from the bar. "I'm sorry," the bridesmaid said, trying to recover. He smiled coolly. "I just found out my date couldn't make it. Thought I'd ask this lovely woman to keep me company." He turned to Lila. "If that's okay with you." Lila blinked, stunned. Every eye at the table was on her. She nodded slowly. Yes. Of course." He extended a hand. "I'm Ethan. Ethan Ward." And just like that, he lifted her out of the shadows, not just from the table, but from her own quiet shame. As they walked toward the main table, whispers followed them like a trail of sparkles. "That's him," someone murmured. "The billionaire investor. The groom's business partner." Lila's heart raced. What on earth was happening? Ethan pulled out a chair for her beside him and smiled. "You look like you needed rescuing," he whispered. She managed a nervous laugh. "You have no idea." For the first time all night, Lila felt seen. But she didn't know that this pretend moment, this act of kindness from a stranger, was only the beginning of something that would test both of their hearts in ways they never imagined. The wedding carried on, but everything felt different now. Lila wasn't invisible anymore. She was sitting beside him, Ethan Ward, the man everyone in town whispered about. The one whose company had funded half the new businesses in the city. He wasn't arrogant like she expected. He asked her about her life, her son, her dreams. He actually listened. And when she apologized for ruining his night by being his fake date, he smiled softly. "You didn't ruin anything, Lila. You reminded me what being real feels like." Later that evening, when the music slowed, Ethan stood and offered her his hand again. "Dance with me?" Lila hesitated. "Ethan, I haven't danced in years." "Then tonight," he said gently, "you start again." They stepped onto the dance floor, and the lights dimmed into a golden haze. For the first time since her divorce, Lila let herself breathe. It wasn't about romance, not yet. It was about dignity. About feeling worthy again. But of course, the whispers began again. Who is she? A single mom? With him? She's probably after his money. Lila heard them and saw the flicker of anger in Ethan's eyes. He leaned close and said, "You don't owe them an explanation. You don't owe anyone one." Tears burned her eyes. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not yet," he said, "but I'd like to." That night ended with a quiet ride home, not in his limousine, but in her old car. He didn't ask to come in, didn't push for anything. He simply said, "You have a strength people like me spend their lives pretending to have. Don't ever hide it again." Weeks passed. Ethan called, not with grand gestures, but with kindness. He fixed a leak in her roof. Helped her get her small catering business started. When Noah met him, he called him Mr. Ethan and asked if he could teach him how to build things. For the first time in years, laughter returned to Lila's home. But when her ex-husband saw Ethan pick her up one evening, he sneered, "So that's your new hobby? Finding rich men to fix your life?" The words hit hard. Lila nearly canceled everything with Ethan that night. But when she told him what happened, he said something she would never forget. "Lila, the world will always try to measure your worth by who you stand beside. Don't let them. You've already rebuilt more than they ever will." That was when she realized it wasn't about pretending anymore. At the next wedding they attended, this time together, she didn't sit in the corner. She walked in hand with Ethan, not as someone's pity date, but as a woman who had learned her value again. And when the music began, it was Lila who pulled him onto the dance floor. Because sometimes, the most beautiful chapters of our lives start when someone simply says, "Pretend you're with me," and we discover we've been strong enough all along to stand on our own. Life doesn't always give second chances in grand ways. Sometimes, it's a stranger's kindness at your loneliest moment that reminds you, you were never broken, just waiting to be seen again.